Shallow Breath is one of the earliest sculptures by the contemporary British artist Rachel Whiteread. This visually captivating and yet enigmatic work evidences Whiteread's practice of making sculptural castings of unseen spaces. This sculpture requires us first to carefully scrutinize the object with our eye, and then second, to transform it in our mind. At first, it might be difficult to identify and interpret what we see in this object. But slowly, Shallow Breath reveals itself to be the plaster cast of the space under a bed. The space between the bed frame and the floor has been cast in plaster. However, in order to discern this sculpture as the space under a bed, we need to be able to imagine everything that we see in reverse. For example, if we look closely, we can observe that the sculpture has 5 horizontal indentations. These imprints in the plaster are the traces of the wooden slats in the bed frame that support the mattress. Also, notice that the sculpture has 4 holes. These are where the legs of the bed were, just as the empty space under the bed has become a solid object. The legs of the bed have become spaces in the sculpture. Reality is reversed. Looking at Shallow Breath is a process of deciphering and imagining. We must carefully read the sculpture as a form, and then try to imagine the material object as immaterial space. This brings us to the second step in Whiteread's project of reorienting our perception. Having made the space under a bed into a solid object, Whiteread then stood the plaster sculpture up and leaned it against the wall. Rather than laying horizontally on the floor, Shallow Breath stands up vertically. In Shallow Breath, Whiteread has reoriented our relationship to the space under the bed. Rather than remaining hidden between the bed and the floor, this space stands up like a figure before us. Rachel Whiteread's method of casting spaces is not just an end in and of itself, but rather it is part of a process in which our perception of space is expanded and transformed. In Shallow Breath, Whiteread has done 2 things to reorient our perception. This sculpture first solidifies space, and second, it reorients space. First, this plaster sculpture makes the unseen and immaterial space under a bed into a material and visible object. It makes a solid form out of the invisible space between a bed and the floor. Second, Whiteread reorients this space. The area under a bed is a horizontal space, but Shallow Breath stands up vertically. This transforms our relationship to the space. Rachel Whiteread's sculpture invigorates the connections between our eye and our mind. Shallow Breath awakens our imagination, sharpens our perception, and enriches our intellect.